Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandia, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the bar room with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com. Welcome to another episode of Greg Gabriel Talks Football. Greg, how are you on this Victory Monday?
I'm good. How about you? How about this, Aldo?
Mm-hmm.
Today is Monday with 2 games left.
Mm-hmm.
And if teams wanted to, they could let guys go.
Mm-hmm.
As of 2 minutes ago,
Mm-hmm.
every coach is still intact.
Interesting. Now, there have already been, though, 2
Well, the Raiders and Jacksonville have already let go of their coaches, so they can begin interviews this week. And actually, if by the new rule, you can interview somebody if you've notified the coach
mm-hmm.
that he will not return.
Mm-hmm. So Matt Nagy, when he was at the podium today, and he answered the question that does he expect to coach the team over the next 2 weeks for the rest of the season, he said that he is assuming yes. He might have been told already that they are going to replace him next season, but he did not divulge that if in fact that did happen.
Well, theoretically, yeah, that could be true, but why would he say that? Why would he, just say, I'm under the assumption that I'm going to be coach here for at least the next 2 weeks.
Right. And that's what he said.
Right. I know. I listened to that part. That's all I listened to.
Yeah. And that's fine. He doesn't have to reveal anything else.
True. But, does he think, and I see a question there. Do I think George is being stubborn? No, I think they got a plan and they're going to go according to that plan. Like I say, as of right now, no standing coach has been let go from a team.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you right now, there's going to be at least 4 done,
mm-hmm.
maybe 5. And because every year there's going to be 6 to 8 openings.
Yep.
And there's not 6 to 8 replacements. So,
and I contend that with everything that's happening in the country with COVID, that it would be much more disruptive for a team to change the head coach out with 2 games left. Let that infrastructure exist for the next 2 weeks, and then get to the business of changing things up for 2023. If that's what you're going to do, you got to have somebody.
You got to have somebody in the building that could handle that job, even if it's only 2 weeks, but still. Somebody who's got the leadership role or knows how to handle that leadership role. The person, for the one game, they use the special teams coach. I think if they were to make a change this week or next week, it would, they'd go to Mike Pettin. That's just my own personal opinion because Mike's been a head coach.
Yeah.
And when he doesn't have a role on the field, so to speak, he's up in the box helping Sean Desai with the defense, but really he doesn't have a role on the field. So I think they would go in that direction. But what the hell do I know?
Louis Riddick of Monday Night Football and ESPN, he said to ESPN 1000 late last week that Matt Nagy already knows his fate, and that none of this is going to be a surprise when he's officially told he's no longer the coach. You agree with that?
Well, I know Louis and Matt are friends. They work together. I worked with Louis and Matt for 1 year in Philly in 2012. I think Louis worked with Matt probably about 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So could he have already been told a week ago?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's possible. But, and I'll tell you one of the interesting things is it would have to leak out.
Mm-hmm.
None of the interviews that can take place this week or next week are done in person. It's not like, you're going to fly off to Tampa to talk to Todd Bowles or fly off to Buffalo to talk to Brian DeBall. It's done like you and I are chatting right now.
Right.
Via Zoom.
Right. I'd be happy to facilitate that meeting, by the way. What do you think about what the Factor says? He wants to know about the other McCaskies. Is George mainly running the show? I know there's some other McCaskies on the board.
All the McCaskies are on the board.
Every son and daughter is on the board of directors?
No. There's Ed McCaskey, Ned, who's an attorney, Brian, Ted Phillips. You've got Pat Ryan, Virginia.
Right.
The main McCaskies, Brian and George being the two main McCaskies, and Virginia are on the board. People, I'm reading this stuff, which I can't stand. One of these days, I'm going to say, just shut the fuck up. But the scrolls coming up when Nagy's having his
I know that irritates.
It does. It's just rude.
Yeah.
And it's by people that have a brain about the size of a pea. But regardless, a lot of them, and you got to get rid of Ted too. Okay, I'll say it for the upteenth millionth time. Ted really has nothing to do with the product on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got people in sports radio here that think that he's got a big say. He doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
My office is right across the hall from Ted's. I know what Ted does. And Ted's main job, and we discussed this, I think, last week, that, well, I'm not necessarily for a, quote, football czar, because then that's just a fancy name for the GM.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said it was Adam Hogue that was writing this, that he there's talk that he may step away from some of that day-to-day stuff.
Yes.
He's got a big job to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's putting together a multi-billion-dollar, let's call it little metropolis down the street from you.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, that in itself is a full-time job.
Absolutely.
Probably over the next, 8 to 10 years?
Absolutely. The pushback, though, on what you're saying is that
I don't care what the pushback is.
is that he's part of that two-headed team that makes decisions on the general manager. They're the ones that interview the next GM. And so indirectly, they have a say on what's on the football field because they're hiring the decision makers.
Well, they didn't really have the say on. They had to go along with Ernie Accorsi's say on the Ryan Pace's hire.
Mm-hmm. But they could have told Ernie, keep looking. They could have said that.
Yeah, but if they're paying Ernie hundreds of thousands of dollars to come up with the best candidate, don't you think they'd go with the candidate that he said this is number one?
It would be stupid not to.
I mean,
I'm going to pay the plumber, and then I'm going to tell the plumber, step aside. Let me do it.
Yeah, I could tell the plumber what to do.
I can.
My house would be flooded in about 3 seconds.
Same here.
So why don't you do this?
Totally agree. But it does. I mean, maybe you can blame them for hiring Ernie Okosi. I mean, Ernie has had success.
Yeah, but Ernie had a good reputation doing that. But hey, it is what Ryan Pace has done some good things. And I'll tell you the one thing, and I'm not pro or con to Ryan Pace. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I've met the guy a few times. He's really a good person. I like him. We got along fine. He was very helpful. Other than that, I mean, I couldn't say he's a friend.
Mm-hmm.
That whole rebuild of Hallis Hall, so to speak,
mm-hmm.
that's all his.
Yeah, and he did a magnificent job by all accounts.
I haven't been inside, but
Mm-hmm.
I know Ballard was telling me, he goes, and this is when, before it hit the media, Ballard already knew about it. And he said, wait till you see what they're going to do to Hallis Hall. Because, we all spent so much time there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all Pace doing that.
Yeah.
And I like the idea how they wrapped it around, the practice field, so to speak.
Yeah, so everybody
in front of the forest
mm-hmm.
over there. It used to be, going a little bit off topic here,
mm-hmm.
You could go out early in the morning. If you got there early in the morning or at dusk, all of a sudden coming out of those trees where that new building is,
mm-hmm.
the trees are behind, there'd be 30, 40, 50 deer.
Wow.
Walking around the practice field.
Gorgeous.
Every day.
That's nice. That's a great environment to build a great football team. Unfortunately, there's other parts of that are not working right now.
Now, I'm not going to mention his name, but one coach, though, decided, well, this is easy hunting. So
that's great.
He and his kid decided to hide in the forest and go hunting, and they got caught because that's a posted area.
Hey, Greg, I'm going to ask you a question. And I don't expect you to tell me the truth because I read Brad Biggs' 10 comments, 10 thoughts that he publishes every Monday, and it's must read for any Bears fan. And one of the chapters, one of the numbers, he quotes extensively somebody who is against the idea of a football czar. And as I'm reading all of these comments, I'm like, this is almost word for word what Greg said. So I wonder if Brad called Greg and off the record, Greg.
I haven't talked to Brad in weeks.
Okay. Somebody else has very similar thoughts to.
I tried. I see it on Twitter. And I tried to click on it, and it said your free reads are done. So
that's ridiculous.
And I'm not going to pay. So I should keep.
They really market the hell out of that. That is like one of the big draws for that newspaper is that column. And and to me, it's really the only thing worth paying for that newspaper for.
Yeah, I tell you what's funny is Christmas Day. My wife and I decided to take the dog for a walk. Right
mm-hmm.
Now, there are a few people in the world that still get a print newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
One of which was 2 doors down from us. So
mm-hmm.
we get there, and there's wrapped up in like a cellophane type bag, a Chicago Tribune. I bet you it was 10 pages. And she goes,
joke.
Can you believe how small this is?
Yep.
I just said, I remember talking to Mully years ago,
mm-hmm.
saying, obviously within the last 20 years, but probably 13 years ago, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I said, the newspaper as we see it now, newspaper business as we see it now isn't going to be anything like that in another 10 years or so. And it's not. Yep. Everything is digital.
Yep.
In fact, somebody did a radio show last week on it.
Mm-hmm.
Who even buys a newspaper anymore?
My brother is the only one that I know, and he still walks around with a transistor radio. And I'm not.
Does it work?
Yes, we were going into a government building once, and the security person stops him and says, "Empty your pockets," and he pulls out his transistor radio, and
I thought it was a freaking bomb.
He holds it up, the security guard, and says, "Hey, look, everybody, this guy's got a transistor radio." Embarrassed the hell out of him. I finally bought him an iPhone so he could get with the times. But back to football. A lot of questions in the chat room, and I've been saving some of them, so we'll get to those momentarily. But I want to just rewind a little bit to yesterday's game and talk about, you mentioned already, the effort was incredible. When I saw Darnell Mooney gain another 15 yards after the catch, when I saw David Montgomery with his yards after contact, when I saw just the fight of this team,
Don't forget to mention Komet.
Thank you. Cole Komet too. It's a long list. Robert Quinn continuing to fight into the fourth quarter to get that important sack. There was just a play after play after play of these guys fighting. And so whenever and I've done it, I've wondered, have these guys quit because they did something terribly on the field? The answer is no, they haven't quit. Jalen Johnson said half the room has quit. I didn't see half.
No, I think, it might have been a slip of the tongue by Jalen or whatever. I don't know Jalen from a hole in the wall, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, me neither.
And there's some, you go back to last week, and Akeem Hicks couldn't play this week because he's got COVID. That poor guy gets hit with something every other week. But did you see that guy's 33 years old now or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
See the enthusiasm he was playing. Yes, they lost, but the enthusiasm he was playing with, it was like he was a 22-year-old rookie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, but he is a leader in that locker room, just like Olin was a leader. And when you have strong leadership, veteran leadership in a locker room, you don't lose players unless those guys don't want the current people there. But these games, every game's on tape, every play's on tape. So they're if you got any pride yourself as a football player, you're going to go all out because somebody's watching that tape. You're going to be, in free agency or something, or be on the waiver wire, and they're going to do it judged on what they saw on that tape. And you know what? I'm going to look at the tape after the season's done. At those types of games, let's see what kind of effort this guy has. It's the same thing with the college draft. If I want to see the effort from a guy who plays on a really poor team.
Yeah.
Is he still in game 10, game 11, playing his ass off, even though that team's getting beat every week? And then you got a football player.
Right. Robert Quinn said it in the post-game press conference that he had. He said every player should know, that their performance today, it could answer the question, yes, the question being, are you going to be back here next season? Because if you've quit on this team, there's no way you're going to be back. So, that's greatly put. And as a fan of the Chicago Bears, I'm just really grateful and proud that the team continues to fight. That is, all we can ask at this point. We know where the issues are. We know that we've got a developing quarterback. We know blah, 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 all the problems. Now, speaking of one of those problems, did Ryan Pace make a mistake in signing Andy Dalton to that $10 million deal? Shouldn't it have been Nick Foles and Justin Fields?
It's a good question. And, you're just backtracking. And, when you look at what the body of work that Andy Dalton put up last year for Dallas when he had to play when Dak went down, versus the body of work that Foles put up last year here, you got a real simple answer. Okay, but Andy Dalton couldn't go yesterday, and Foles did go, and Foles came through. He played good. Now the one thing, and I don't know, part of it was the weather or the wind or what, but he doesn't have a whole lot of zip in that arm anymore.
Yeah,
and he used, I was in Philly with Foles when he was a rookie. And that son of a gun had an arm to him. And, you compare his arm to Justin Fields. Oh, my God. It's like me throwing against Justin Fields.
Yeah.
I can't throw.
You know, Greg, at the Family Fest scrimmage that they had at Soldier Field before the season started, I noted that very same thing about Foles' arm strength. It looked so much less than Dalton and Fields. It was quite amazing. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why the Bears brought in Andy Dalton is they saw his arm strength isn't the same. I don't know.
Yeah, but, you know, he's not that old. So, right. You know, why? The question I have is why? You know, and is he not doing what needs to be done to keep his arm strength up? Hell, you know, Tom Brady's getting ready to collect Social Security. And that sucker can still swing it.
That's right. He does have a good arm. I saw some throws yesterday.
He's got a better arm today at 44 years old than he had as a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lock. You go back and look at the tape.
Well, do you think it's steroids?
No, but you learn how to. Everybody talks about his picture at the East-West and at the Combine, you know, and it looked like the next time he goes into the weight room will be the first time he ever went to the weight room.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was the world's, and I was there. The East-West game was in San Francisco. And when I tell you people were laughing,
really,
they were actually laughing when he got up. And it's like, oh, Jesus, what's this guy been doing the last 4 years of his life? And that's what with that and you know the Lloyd Carr was the coach at Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he had promised Drew Henson, who was a 5-star recruit and baseball player and a football player, that he was going to get the starting job. He hadn't played a college game, and that pissed off Brady a lot. That's why, you know, Brady wouldn't go back to Michigan for years and years and years because of that.
Yeah,
you know, it's only been in recent years that they kissed and made up.
I don't
know if they completely kissed and made up, but you know, Lloyd Carr's long been gone, but he got screwed over. But still, he didn't do anything to help himself as far as taking care of himself in the weight room. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times back then, teams didn't require it for quarterbacks. Now look at a guy like Justin Fields and some of these other guys; they're put together now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they didn't come out of the womb looking like that.
Yeah.
You know, that they had to do a little bit of work.
They worked hard.
And there's different exercises that they can do to help increase the arm strength. Perfect example is Drew Brees. Did not have a very strong arm. And I guess he just said, you know, that I guess they tried to talk him out of retirement last week or the week before. And you know, he's said he's lost his arm because he hasn't worked on it. And I believe it because I was at Purdue, his final year at Purdue, and he couldn't complete a 50. It was on a windy day. So that's why I was glad I was there. He couldn't complete a 15-yard out. He was short on every one.
A couple more questions regarding what we saw yesterday. I guess one of the disappointing things for me is that some of the young players, some of the future nucleus of this team weren't available or weren't on the field when we staged this dramatic comeback to win in Seattle, which is a tough place to win, even if you're playing against a bad Seahawks team, which they were.
No, it's one of the harder places in the league to play.
Right. And so did it surprise you that the Bears started Artie Burns and started Jermaine Ifedi and made some other choices that weren't dedicated towards player development and instead were dedicated perhaps to just getting a win?
Well, let's start on the offensive line. The plan was Ifedi. I know some people don't like him. The guy's a good football player. He's graded out well. He's played well. He and Borum did play well as his replacement. There's no question. You know, it was supposed to be Tevin Jenkins and Ifedi playing yesterday. So your question was going to be answered correctly there. You had a young guy, developmental guy. Something happened in that Bears first series. I rewatched it just an hour ago. Yeah. I didn't see a thing, but he did something to his shoulder. And, you know, the last play in that series was pass protection. and he had a good punch. You know, whether he's got a little muscle strain in there, you know, who knows? They said they don't have an answer yet. I'm sure they'll, you know, they might by now, but they didn't when he did his presser at 11 or 12 o'clock.
Right.
Because, you know, they'll do an MRI and they got to get the results of that back. And the doctor's going to look at it. And I already, you know, they got to go down to Glenview for that. Or the doctors can come into the building, one or the other. But, you know, it's, you know, what does that mean going forward for the final two games? Well, I'll tell you, Borum then came in and he's been practicing on the right side. He has to come in on the left side and play. Got beat once, semi-beat another time, but all told, not that bad. And I thought Jenkins did okay in that first series. But then somehow, you know, we got some mysterious ailment. But Thomas Graham was playing in a rotation, so he got snaps. Don't forget, he's only played in one freaking game since, you know.
It's a good point.
And that was, you know, last year. But Das Ferguson caught a pass, returned a kick. You know, so I don't, what I'm saying is I don't know if I can agree with that saying that they weren't playing these guys. And on top of that, you got to keep the locker room happy, and those veterans want to play with the best guys.
That is very, very important point. Yes.
You know, and so you got to earn your right to play. But I think there was a combination of the two. You know, Tonga was playing a lot, and he had been out. And I guess today they said, what, there's 4 or 5 guys coming back from COVID today.
Yeah, all of a sudden,
and nobody went back on. I tell you, I think they're going to smoke the Giants, and that's my old team, and I got a soft spot.
I am with you. I was on record as saying I didn't think the Bears were going to win another game this season. This was 2-3 weeks ago.
They should have won. They should have won last week.
They should have. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
They did win yesterday, and it's either going to be Jake Fromm or Mike Glennon at quarterback. That's, you know, that's like Dumb and Dumber. Jake, and I'll tell you what, if it's Jake Fromm and Justin Fields is playing, watch out.
It's possible, though, that Mike Glennon is going to come in here
and get killed.
Well, also that he might have that revenge game as we've seen.
My ass! Like, I couldn't get. Let me tell you something. You and I can line up on the defensive line, and we could get pressures and sacks.
I love it
because he can't move.
Yeah, he's awful. He really is. Well, and that's a different story. I think it was, Brad Biggs again noted the quarterbacks that Ryan Pace has invested millions of dollars into, like $52 million over the last 6 seasons on guys who were going to come in here to be the starter, temporary starter, and Chase Daniel. So that's a lot of money wasted on veteran quarterbacks. But I want to talk about that in depth on a future show.
No, but I'm going to say this, because I was thinking about this yesterday. Okay, next year, Justin Fields, assuming he's healthy, is going to be this starting quarterback, right?
Right.
Okay, who's going to be your backup? Is he currently on the roster, or are they going to bring in somebody else?
They should bring in.
I'm going to say he's going to be currently on the roster.
Yes.
Whether it's Nick Foles or Andy Dalton. Now, Dalton may say, hey, I want a chance to compete.
Yes.
But Foles, I think, has a little bit of a different mindset. But you take in the fact this guy has gotten very little reps all year. Since preseason, he got reps because he played in the preseason. Since then, he's getting the third team reps.
And not all of them.
Right. No, let me tell you something. The third team doesn't get any reps. It's all here. It's mental reps.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, he could be, early on, they were going to have Justin Fields be the scout team quarterback. Well, that's not the case anymore. So Nick Foles could be, and especially with Dalton down with COVID and stuff, that, Nick had to be in that role. But just for him, basically have 1 week of preparation to come in, go across the country, play in snow at a tough environment and win. That's what you got a backup for.
Yeah, exactly. I would not be upset if Nick Foles was the backup quarterback next year. He's under contract, so you don't now have to spend millions of dollars to acquire another quarterback and still have the same problem of paying 3 quarterbacks. You can allocate those dollars to another position that would make sense, and then you bring in a developmental quarterback. You know, there's been teams who have won with Trevor Siemian types, and so look for that developmental quarterback.
Well, your third quarterback theoretically should be the practice squad quarterback because you can always bring them up.
Okay.
And, you know, and I think going forward, and I'm throwing a dart at the wall here, that because we've been through 2 seasons now of this COVID thing, and you've had larger practice squads and you could juggle guys around, and let's face it, COVID is here forever. Okay, it's part of life. I think they're going to have a total handle on it, and I think the news media. Okay, here comes my political announcement. I think the news media is making a way too big a deal over this Omicron or whatever the hell it is, because it's really a mild strain. It's not a killer like the original COVID was, and in fact, they basically eradicated it in South Africa where it started. So, but neither here nor there to get off of that topic. Still, I think the rules, the game day rules, where you can bring guys on and off the practice squad and bring them up, I wouldn't be a bit. I haven't seen any abuse, and that was one of the main reasons they had some of that stuff, because they didn't want teams hiding people. And I think that it's worked pretty well, and so I think it's here to stay.
I'm glad. I like it.
I mean, that's my own personal opinion. Sure. You know, it's like, you know, the government institutes a new tax. Do they ever take it away? Never. We don't need that, man. Yeah. When I was a kid, they built these bridges and they put tolls on them in Buffalo, right?
Yeah.
These tolls are going to be here for 15 years to pay for the bridge. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Guess what? It's 60 years later. Those tolls are still there.
That's right. And they're not producing any jobs anymore because those people who were collecting the toll are now out of work because it's all automated.
Everything. So. You know, so now it's a real cash money maker.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and they never get rid of it. So, you know, using that same thought process, there might be some little changes, but I think it's going to be very, very similar to what we've had the last 2 years.
Okay, interesting. All right, I want to get to some of these questions I have. There's a new feature here on StreamYard that allows me to bookmark questions, and so this is kind of cool. I can put up a question that was asked 30 minutes ago when we started the show. So I'll start with Aaron, the bearded Bears fan, Aaron Current, my buddy. He says, is John Harbaugh out in Baltimore and Tomlin out in Pittsburgh? Have you heard anything regarding that?
I would say no and no.
Yeah, it seems hard to believe. I mean,
Tomlin has had, first of all, that's not Pittsburgh's way of doing things. Pittsburgh's had, and you know, since I've been in the league, 3 coaches.
Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Tomlin.
That's right.
That's amazing.
That's the way they do things. And Kevin Colbert has been the GM. I mean, he didn't have the GM title until, say, the last 10, 12, 13 years or something like that, but he was the GM, not necessarily a name for the last 20 years anyway, 19 years. And Kevin and I are the same age. Kevin might be a year younger. There's other people in the league that think Kevin may step down for the same reason we were saying with Pete Carroll. You're going to have to get a quarterback. Why go through all that, you know, the BS, and unless he sticks around, you know, to make sure they get the right quarterback via trade or whatever, you know, they're going to be drafted in the middle of the first round, and so then you're going to have to give up a lot. Maybe they're in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. Maybe they're in the Russell Wilson sweepstakes.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as a class organization run by class people, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the best.
Yeah.
And no, I don't see Mike Tomlin going anywhere. Kevin could step down, and I've heard if that's the case, they already got a guy ready to move right up, who's been there for a while. Harbaugh's too damn good a coach.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it would be,
and they haven't had their quarterback for about half the season.
Right. It would be criminal to let any of those two guys go. In my opinion.
They've had, I mean, they're run by quality people, and fans think short term, and I'm not criticizing fans, but that it's what have you done for me lately? Oh, Harbaugh, he can't coach anymore. We need somebody else. Well, you know what? Until you sit in the building and watch what they do, you don't know.
Yep. I agree. I mean, it's like the temperature goes up and down every week. I love this guy. I hate this guy. I love this guy. And they're talking about the same person. Anyway, the Factor has an outstanding question here. He says, Greg, what has this Bears organization done wrong the last 30 years that has made them a bad organization and football team? What can they do differently moving forward to be better?
Okay, Mr. Factor, what was wrong with the team from 2001 to 2010?
Went to the Super Bowl. That's nothing bad.
Four playoff teams, 3 division titles. I got the division title ball sitting right over here. So what did we do wrong there? It's been Jerry was let go after the 2010 season, the day after the 2010 season. And so the last 10 years, it hasn't been that good. But they still got to the playoffs twice. People say, oh, they backed in last year. Hey, do you know how many other teams would have loved to have backed in? They got in the playoffs. You get in the playoffs, you got a chance. So
let me offer this as a follow-up, and it's actually from Chris Watts. He says, what's the main difference between how Pittsburgh is run compared to the Bears?
They don't make any changes.
So,
continuity.
But you got to bring in the right head coach. You're not advocating that Matt Nagy stick around, right?
No, but that has been the secret of the Pittsburgh success is continuity. Gotcha. They work through the bad years. They don't make rash decisions. Kevin hasn't had a good draft every year. He hasn't always made, hey, one of his first round picks is playing corner for us. And Artie Burns. He's made mistakes. And Tomlin's had a couple bad seasons. Got a good quarterback, though, or for the most part of his career, he's had a pretty good quarterback in which to work with, and that's part of the answer right there. Now, will Pittsburgh be as strong going forward without having that quarterback? I don't think, Mason Rudolph is the number one backup there. I like Mason Rudolph coming back, but I think Mason Rudolph is a backup. He's not going to get you into the playoffs.
Nope.
So they got to go out and get somebody else, and that's the hard part. They were able to draft Roethlisberger. Are they going to be able to draft anybody this year that can play like he can?
Probably not.
So then it's the veteran route. Okay, and if you get Russell Wilson, what do you? Okay, you're buying him for what? 5 years, 6 years, maybe 7.
Yeah,
and then you got to do it again. But again, the Pittsburgh thing has been the stability within the franchise. People, it's like when I worked for the Giants. You never got fired. I'd still be working there. I might be in a wheelchair, but I'd still be working. If I hadn't left and taken the job here.
That's funny.
But I mean, we had a couple guys. Give you a Bears name from way long ago. Ken Kavanaugh. Do you remember that name?
Oh yeah, sure.
Ken was a scout with us until he was freaking 90 years old.
I didn't know that.
And he'd drink a bottle of bourbon and smoke cigarettes and chew cigars all day. And Tucker was the healthiest guy on earth.
All right, let's move on to our next question here. This is Bear Truth 9. One of the things I like in Ryan Pace is I have confidence and he will get the deal done on players he really wants. So he seems good in negotiating. That is a quality about Ryan Pace that a lot of people should respect. If he's targeted somebody in the draft or perhaps even free agent.
He doesn't do that. Let's clear up something.
Please.
He's not doing the negotiating.
Okay.
The cap guy is.
Okay. So he says, I want this player. Can we work it out money wise?
Yeah. And there's now you talk to agents, and there's some agents that get along fine. And Cliff Stein was the cap guy when I was there, and he's the corporate counsel now.
Mm-hmm.
And you won't find a person in the league that'll ever say a bad thing about Cliff Stein.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was negotiating contracts, Cliff was tough, but very, very fair.
Mm-hmm.
And every agent really respected him. Now, the guy they got now, from what I'm told, he can be a little brash. And there's some agents that just don't care for him.
Mm-hmm.
But he's, they've got some deals done. I know that Ryan Pace seems to have, and I'm throwing, I use the term throwing a dart at the walls because I'm not, you're not there,
mm-hmm.
but he seems to run the cap, in the Mickey Loomis school of cap play. And you're doing a lot of credit card spending on that. You're renegotiating and trying to create money now. And it does come back to bite you in the ass.
Yes, it does.
And, they're going to have 25 more million right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get, or 20 or 25 million right off the bat. You're not going to have A-Rob. So that's another 18 million. And, you're probably not going to have Hicks, and there's, what's he getting? 10 million or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're going to have just those two players and the added cap space can get you a bunch of players,
mm-hmm.
but you're still got, you're going to have to take care of some other guys. And I think you're going to have to some guys are going to have to get some haircuts. It is one of the deals I don't think they should have done when you look back, and looking back means nothing because
Sure.
Danny Trevathan doesn't look like it was a wise decision.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, but how are they going to get out from under it?
Mm-hmm.
And look at unless you somehow restructure his deal and he takes a haircut, and you don't get killed on the cap, yet he stays on the team.
Mm-hmm.
But I've said this, and I say it in my little side job when I got to go through certain things. But if you're getting $8 million or $5 million or $10 million, you got to give that back to the team in production.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you're giving a guy $5 million and he's giving $1 million of production back to you, you're overpaying him and he's got to go.
Mm.
Or you got to fix it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way you can do it. And so you become expendable then.
What do you think about what H777 says here? He says Angelo was much better. Jerry Angelo, the former Bears general manager, was much better with contracts. I know some people hate Jerry Angelo, but I don't like Pace's spending habits. They had two different philosophies in terms of how to manage.
Well, we didn't have as much money. We didn't have as much money to work with as they had.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the cap goes up every year.
Right.
So, but we had one of the all-time great negotiators.
Oh, what was his name?
Cliff Stein.
Cliff Stein. Yes.
And Cliff is still there.
Okay.
And, Cliff got deals done.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember there's Devin Hester. Eugene Parker had him.
Mm-hmm.
May he rest in peace. And Eugene drove a tough bargain, but we got the deal done.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a fair deal for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
But you keep working at it. I'll tell you, going into my storytelling again, but when I worked for the Giants and the teams had more control over things than they have now because there was no free agency when I started there.
Mm-hmm.
None whatsoever. And then the agent was the enemy,
Mm-hmm.
at least to the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you treated them almost as such, and when I came here and I had worked with Jerry in New York for 3 or 4 years, and then he went to Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
But the game was starting to change. And when he was in Tampa is when free agents, first we had Plan B, remember Plan B?
Yep.
And we had Plan B, and then we got into full-fledged free agency. But you had to change your attitude or philosophy towards the agent world.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't be your adversary. They have to be your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can develop good relationships with a bunch of the key guys, then that's going to pay off, especially when you want to get a contract done, you want a player. There's a few agents that we dealt with. They always did us a favor
Mm-hmm.
when we needed it. Always. And some of these guys are considered, tough agents or whatever, because again, it's the way you treat them. They in order to have success in this league, you have to have a good relationship with the agents.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a given.
And when I tell you, I spent a good part of my week, I won't say day, but I'll say week, just calling agents and talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not lying. And let me tell you, Christmas, it paid off. I got a boatload full of stuff now.
Nice.
Now, I missed that part.
Yeah, sort of like a payola, maybe.
They were IMG at the time. Now they're CAA. They might have been, they might have been CAA for this, but Tom Condon and Fuzzy Kramer, and Fuzzy's retired.
Mm-hmm.
They sent me a personalized bottle of Maker's Mark. You ever had Maker's Mark bourbon?
I got an empty bottle right here.
Well, you know how they got yeah, okay, but you know how they've got like the candle wax at the top?
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, put up the bottle there. So it had a special color of the candle wax, yep. And then on the label itself,
Mm-hmm.
specially made for Greg Gabriel Chicago Bears.
Wow. What? Hey, honey. She messed up this Christmas. All right, let's get to some of these other questions. Our resident Detroit Lions fan, Don Burr, says, ask Greg his thoughts on John Dorsey and Dom Capers, even though they're in Detroit's front office. I think he's wondering, do you think these guys are guys that the Chicago Bears might be interested in?
I've known John forever.
Mm-hmm.
Knew him when he was a player, coming out of the University of Connecticut. He was a linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Japan with John. Remember the old Japan Bowl?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
So
cool stadium.
My former wife and John and his former wife, we were there. I got a picture. It might be in my drawer behind me. We were at one of the sumo wrestler stables.
Mm-hmm.
And, we spent like the day there. And I'll tell you that's a show in itself, just talking about the stuff that goes on there. But, the whole ideology, I can't even say that word, ideology of what goes on,
Mhm.
in sumo wrestling. But there's a picture, it was in the Japanese sports paper of Dorsey and I watching the sumo wrestlers work out. And but John is not a good evaluator. He's a great evaluator. The cons are, and that's why he was let go. And John, let's go back. John was at Green Bay for a long time, and that was that's where he met Andy Reid. Andy Reid was the offensive line coach, and so they remained close friends. While Andy was in Philadelphia and John was at Seattle and back at Green Bay. So when Andy gets the gig at Kansas City, he brings in John as his GM, and it didn't work. And they had been friends because I guess, John could be brash.
Oh, really?
And he's going to do things his way. And it just, what I've been told, and I can't, I wasn't there, is that like his communication with ownership and stuff wasn't the best. And, since then, he then gets the gig at Cleveland. And he wasn't there that long, and he gets let go there.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with his ability to evaluate. But is he stubborn? And I'm right? Yeah. You could say that. Don Capers, I mean, that they'd be like hiring me. You're hiring a real old guy.
You have better hair, by the way.
And I guarantee I'm in better shape. I got my workout in today.
Good.
But they got rid of Capers. Mike McCarthy got rid of Capers up in Green Bay. Then, the Pettin was the DC, and now they got another guy. What's Capers doing in Detroit anyways? He's not the DC, is he? I don't think so. I can't hear you, Aldo. I lost you.
I think he's just an advisor to the team.
Okay. Advisor to the coaching staff?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what Dorsey was originally hired for. I don't, I think he's full time though. I don't think he's a consultant. And he knew some of the people involved, and he probably knew Spielman because Spielman's there now. And Chris Spielman, not Rick. Rick's in Minnesota. I like John a lot. He's a good guy, but is he the best guy for this job? Probably not.
Don corrected me. Capers is there to help Aaron Glenn as the defensive coordinator.
Okay, well, that's like Mike Pettin. Same thing.
By the way, you got a vote for Bears president from Jamal Lewis. Thank you, Jamal, for that. We'll get back to our questions here.
Okay, well, I got one vote. I'm good.
You got to start with one. You got a second one for me, by the way.
Okay.
When you mentioned earlier about evaluating tape at the end of the season, PZ asked, when you look at tape at the end of the season, do you start from game 1 or game 17 or somewhere specific? I think that's a good question because if you look at it from the beginning of the season, you kind of can see a storyline there, but perhaps some people do it differently. What are your thoughts?
It's really going to get down to the guy who's doing it, watching the tape, and he's got his own way of doing things.
Right.
That I am personally going to look for the best matchups first. You're not going to look at 17 games.
Okay.
Except maybe for a quarterback or something,
Okay.
And you're not going to look at a highlight tape either. because you got to have the lowlights.
Absolutely.
But personally, I would like if I'm going to look at a college player, the first thing, and say it's right now, the season's over except for the bowl games.
Mm-hmm.
I want to look for the best matchups first.
Mm-hmm.
Who did he play against? Say if it's a lineman, offensive lineman or defensive lineman.
Mm-hmm.
Who were the best people he went against? And I'm going to look at those games first.
Mm-hmm.
Then I want to see a game where they got their asses kicked to see how he played in a game like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think Mustafa is a perfect example of that. He's had some average, maybe a little bit better average game against a couple of top flight interior defensive linemen. And then he's had below average games against guys who are, to me anyway, no names. I mean, yesterday he had a kind of a tough game against Seattle. I saw him being pushed back into Foles in the pocket a number of times. But he's a guy, you know, are you in agreement with a lot of fans that the Bears need a new center next season?
Well, I mean, you know, Mustafa can start in the league, but is he a quality starter?
So far,
No.
yeah.
Okay, and I've given this some thought, thinking, okay, how are they going to have this line? Is it going to be, you know, Borum and Tevin Jenkins are going to be the tackles?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things you might do is put Daniels back at center where he's drafted to be. Now, a lot of this is going to be, okay, who's the offensive line coach and who's the head coach and everything else, and how they want to work it, and what's your blocking scheme going to be. But let's assume that they move Daniels back to center.
Right.
Okay. And then, so now you got an opening at right guard. Okay. Who are you going to put there? Well, you could bring back a Fetty, keep him at right tackle, and you can put Borum at right guard.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's a lot of guards in this league that were tackles when they were drafted.
Yep.
You know, you want to get your best five guys out there, theoretically your best five, but, you know, there's only a few people that can play the center. And Daniels directs traffic anyway. If you watch him during the game, he's doing a lot of stuff that the center does. You see him stand up a lot and point things out. That's what the center does usually. So he's already got that role. So, you know, why not? And you look at his body. I mean, you ever see his ass?
It's
this freaking big.
The size of my SUV.
Yeah, and you know, I saw a thing. They usually list him at around 312, and I saw a thing just recently. No, he's 330.
Yeah, his ass 312.
I personally, because of the big mammoths that you got sometimes playing on the nose or at the one technique, I want a big guy that can stay low and get some movement with those big guys. And, you know, somebody who's power, and your power comes from your lower body. Okay. It's not, don't tell me, you know, oh, you can bench press 30 reps. So what? If he doesn't have a strong hips, he doesn't have any power.
Right.
You know, a strong butt. And that guy, you know, as Jerry Reese would call him, he's a seat smasher. Yeah. He's got that big butt and you know, there's a lot of power in there.
Yeah.
So and he played center most of his career at Iowa. So that's what I do. Now, who's going to be your right guard and your right? You could put Bars there. But is Bars a starter, or is he a good backup that can do a lot of things?
Yeah, I like Bars as that versatile guy who can put in anywhere. He gives you a couple of good quarters, at least. All right, let's move on to our next question here. The Factor asks, do you believe that Matt Nagy has helped develop Justin Fields this season? And I keep going back to a lot of people leave John DeFilippo outside the equation of developing Justin Fields. DeFilippo is the quarterback coach, and there's been a lot of speculation that, you know, it would be perhaps not real smart if you are getting a head coach next season, that DeFilippo should probably stay and continue the development of Fields. Your thoughts, please.
Well, and I'm throwing a dart at the wall here.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not knowing. You got 3 quarterback gurus in that building: the head coach, the OC, and the quarterback coach. And so,
Maybe.
yeah, they all. But is there too much going into a guy's ear?
It's a great point.
Okay, and I don't have the answer. I'm just saying that there's Flip's got a good resume. I've never worked with Flip, so I can't tell you what I've seen, but I know people regard him highly. So would he be a candidate to stay? Well, that's gonna, who's the coach going to be,
mm-hmm.
and what's the relationship with that coach?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you who I wouldn't mind seeing as an offensive coordinator if they bring in a new coach,
mm-hmm.
and then that coach has to, let's say Todd Bowles or something like that.
Okay.
I'll tell you a name I'd want an offensive coordinator right
mm-hmm.
off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Is Pep Hamilton.
Somebody who you've known for years, right?
Yeah, worked with him twice, and first of all, who was the quarterback coach with the LA Chargers last year when Herbert was setting rookie records?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was some guy named Pep Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then he goes to Houston this year because that staff got fired out in LA. And he's not going to have one of the best quarterbacks in the game in Deshaun Watson. And that's one of the reasons he went there,
mm-hmm.
Because the shit hit the fan, after he took the job.
Mm-hmm.
So he's had to play musical chairs. Right now, he's got that rookie from Stanford playing pretty damn good football.
He does.
Okay, so,
yeah.
And I know Pep's offense.
Mm-hmm.
He's been an OC in the league. He's been an OC in college. He's been a quarterback coach in the league for several teams, and he was a head coach in the XFL.
Mm-hmm.
He's highly respected. And now how about this? He stepped down from his job as OC at Michigan
mm-hmm.
to become an XFL head coach. And part of it was, he was Andrew Luck's coach at Stanford. And then he was Andrew Luck's coach with the Colts at the beginning. He was the offensive coordinator and the quarterback coach at the first 4 years of Andrew's career. Mm. So he had a very, very good relationship with Andrew's dad, Oliver Luck, who was the commissioner of the XFL. And it was Oliver who came to Pep to, be a head coach. And because of that relationship, Pep left Michigan. And looking back, was it a wise move? Maybe not, but he wanted to be that head coach. And he's got plenty of money. That it's not like you were making millions working in the XFL, because you weren't. But had it succeeded, if COVID hadn't come around, we'd still be playing right now, or we'd be getting ready for our third season right now,
mm-hmm.
and he'd still be the head coach, and that's what he wanted. He went to school in DC, and our franchise is in DC, so he had a lot of connections there.
Cool.
Yeah, but that's a guy. It wouldn't take me too long to pick up the phone and being that he's a quarterback coach. Now they wouldn't have to let him go,
mm-hmm.
because theoretically, even though you're a coordinator, it's not necessarily an upward move.
Mm-hmm.
They might have changed the designation just in the last couple of years, but it used to be, if you were going to get interviewed for a coordinator's job, the team did not have to let you go.
Right.
But, Pep's a minority candidate. He's got a great resume.
Yeah.
I'd hire him in a second and a half.
Bear Truth 9 asked the question, does Pep have connections with Todd Bowles?
I don't know that. I really don't know that.
Because you know both of those guys very well.
Yeah, I know Pep better than I know Todd,
mm-hmm.
but I've known Todd longer, but I've got a multi-year working agreement with Pep.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think the world of Pep. So
you wouldn't be adverse to, let's say you were in that position of hiring the next coach. You wouldn't be adverse to a Todd Bowles, Pep Hamilton combination.
Hell no.
Yeah. And Aaron, the Bearded Bears fan, says, that sounds great, Greg. What head coach would bring Pep Hamilton over? You think there's somebody who would automatically?
Well, I mean, that's it. It's a lot of it's relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I know of one name because I'm close with Todd's agent. I know of one name that's on his list for the OC.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I sent him a text yesterday. I said, Tony, we haven't discussed this, but this is the name you should be looking at, because I just wasn't thinking about it the last time we talked, and that was Pep.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, but I know another name that it's an intriguing name,
mm-hmm.
and I don't know who the other people are.
Okay.
So I mean, I don't know who the names are. Not that I don't know them. I might know them. I just don't know who the names are.
Okay. All right. Other questions we have here. J Rock wants to know, is Greg Roman ready to be a head coach? They scored a lot of points without Lamar Jackson.
It's a interesting question. And let's go back about 9 years. He was the hot name.
Yeah.
He was at San Francisco under Harbaugh,
mm-hmm.
and he had Colin Kaepernick at quarterback, and that was the name, and didn't get a job. Why he didn't get a job, I have no idea. But then he goes to Buffalo, he didn't do too well. He goes someplace else, didn't do too well. And now he's at Baltimore, and he's doing well. Well, what's part of that? Got a pretty good quarterback. They kind of go hand in hand. When you got lousy players, you're not as good a coach as when you got good players. Does he deserve a chance? He deserves to be interviewed. I don't know the man, so I can't say yay or nay. But, his career has been up and down, though. It's hot now, and it was hot 9-10 years ago. But in between, not anywhere close. And he's been let go, in between. Not like, so that's why you can't always go with these so-called hot names.
Yeah.
Because the media doesn't know.
Yeah. It is true. I mean, the Bears have hired some hot names too, like Matt Nagy, and, I won't name all the names, but it hasn't always worked out. So it is not a science, that is for sure. Other questions for you. Winston Robbins wanted to know your thoughts about Angelo Blackson, the interior defensive lineman that the Bears acquired at the beginning of the season from the Arizona Cardinals. He's had a number of snaps with this team. How do you evaluate the big guy's play, and do you think that perhaps he's a building block for 2022 and maybe beyond?
He's a good rotational player. He's good in the role that he plays.
Mm-hmm.
And in today's NFL game, you're trying to play with 5 or 6 defensive linemen every game, and interior defensive linemen.
Yeah.
And he plays that role, has
mm-hmm.
to play more some weeks than in other weeks because of injuries. But that's what he is. He's a role player. You win. Remember I said you win because of, or you win with?
Mm-hmm.
You win with guys like him. You don't win because of it. Now, I'm not saying that as a negative. That's what he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's never going to go to the Pro Bowl.
Right.
He's going to give you an honest day's work. He's going to bring his lunch, and he's going to make his opponent work.
Yeah.
You need guys like him on your team.
Absolutely. Totally with you there.
And he doesn't cost a lot of money.
Right. Right. J-Rock wants to know, and I think this is a great question too. Why do the Packers get so much production from their offensive line? And I mean, they've got backups, they got rookies, they've had so many injuries, and yet over and over again, it seems like they're getting good production out of the offensive line. Your thoughts?
Because they got a quarterback gets the ball out of his hand in about a tenth of a second.
And can avoid the pressure. That's right.
No, you know, he's seen everything that could be possibly thrown at him, meaning Aaron Rodgers, and he knows what to expect every time he comes up to the line of scrimmage. You aren't going to fool him. And his release is lightning quick. He gets the ball out of his hand. You don't get very few shots at him.
Yeah. Chris Watts wants to know what you think about the Bears potentially being sold. Can you see that in any way?
Not going to happen. Not in my lifetime.
Why?
Because it's the family business.
What about when Virginia passes? Do you think the team would entertain bidding?
No, because I think they've already stated that publicly. Now, could there be, and I guarantee you this is already taken care of. You know, there's already, when Virginia passes, the who is going to become the spokesman, and it's probably going to be George still, you know, because we'll go to the eldest, and Michael's not around anymore. And for all intents and purposes, George is the owner. But could there be some of those kids that want to cash in? That could very well be. But, I would think that if you had real good estate planning going on, that would be taken care of. Those scenarios have already been worked out so that when she does pass, it's not something you have to think about then. It's already been thought out and worked out, and what's going to happen.
I think 777 has nailed it. Why would they sell? They have all the money and it continues to appreciate. I mean, it's the goose that's laying golden eggs. It's
and it's going to grow more.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, do you know what the value of that team's going to be after that new stadium gets built? And they're going to probably own the stadium, unless you're going to own part of it because, you're a citizen of Arlington Heights.
I'm going to be selling parking space in front of the house. That's for sure.
Well, that's a long walk from your house to where Arlington
I got
Park
the bus service too. $100.
You got what?
The bus service. I got a mini bus ready to roll. Take you to the game.
Yeah, they just spent 2 years fixing Lake Cook Road. They're going to be doing it again. That's going to happen, don't you?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yes. All right. I got a couple more for you. Go ahead. Please finish your thought.
No, but I forgot what the damn question was.
I forgot to. Well, it'll pop back into our mind. Let me have you entertain this thought. Laz, when you were talking about the New York Giants, Laz offered up. What happened to the G-men, Greg?
I don't know. And I love all the people there. There's a theory. I've had a couple reporters from 2 different New York papers call me in the last week for articles. And I said, well, I'll talk, but don't use my name. And, but I mean, there's some people, some theories that the GM, and this goes back to when Jerry Reese was the GM and now with Gettleman, that they are the GM, but they don't have all the control that a GM has because, some of the Maras are ultra involved. Now, I had a very good working relationship with Chris Mara. And, Chris was a scout when I was a scout. He did, there was no, Chris would say, hey, I know I'm a member of the Lucky Sperm Country Club. And I appreciate it. But he said, but at the same time, he started scouting as soon as he got done with college. and has been scouting ever since. And he is a very, very good evaluator. But when you're in that role of, so is he qualified to be the GM? Absolutely.
Okay.
Probably be a real good one. But do you want somebody with the name Mara being the GM?
No.
Because right now, as an owner and his brother gets all the BS for being the owner when they're all pretty much equal part owners.
Interesting. Okay.
Which would be the same thing with the McCaskies. I mean, like the voting rights, I might have to give my voting rights to you, but you and I both are, say, 10% partners. You follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So that's how these things work with these families. And both the McCaskey families and the Mara families are prolific Irish Catholic families that got a lot of kids. So there is a name. He's a Mara, but his last name isn't Mara.
Okay.
And he is the director of player personnel right now. And he was at Notre Dame for a long time. Charlie Rice brought him to Notre Dame. He's been back in the family business now for 4 or 5 years. He's the director of player personnel. His name is Tim McDonald.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Tim's a Mara because his mother's a Mara. And that's why he doesn't have
Gotcha.
a Mara last name.
Right.
So, but it's the same thing. I mean, he's part of the family, but he doesn't have that last name. Do you want him in that role? And what people are struggling with in the New York area now is they say, well, they always elevate from within. Well, they've had success elevating from within. George Young was there when I was there. Then Ernie Accorsi was brought in knowing that George was only going to work a few more years. So Ernie worked 2 years as the assistant GM, really to know the Giant way of doing things.
Right. Okay.
And learning. And then Jerry Reese got hired when I was there, worked his way up. And then a year or maybe 2 years after I came here, he got elevated to director of player personnel and then finally general manager. Was he the right guy? He won 2 Super Bowls. But when you look at his overall drafting, it wasn't that good. Dave Gettleman came when Dave originally started with the Buffalo Bills. And that's when I met him. He was living in Buffalo. And then he was with Denver for a long time. And then we hired him as the assistant director of pro scouting, knowing Timmy Rooney was going to retire. And Dave spent 1 year as the assistant, and then he got elevated to the director of the director of pro scouting, and then got the job, was in that role for, 4 or 5 years or whatever. Then got the GM job down in Carolina. Had a falling out with and it really I don't think it had anything to do with the record with the owner, and that owner was, he's gone now, but he was brash to say the least. So then Dave got brought back to New York. They knew him. So they, the fans and the media want them to bring in somebody from the outside who's brand new. Is that going to happen? I don't know. I think the two, if there's 2 people inside, one guy I would think serious about, the other guy I wouldn't. Kevin Abrams is the assistant GM. I would never make him a GM.
Okay.
That's me. And I like Kevin, but he was a cap guy, and cap guys shouldn't be GMs.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. They're not evaluators. A lot of them think they are. A lot of people think they are, but they're not. And then Timmy. But Timmy's, you got that bloodline. I just don't know if that's a good idea.
Yeah.
If they do it in Dallas, the Joneses are.
Mm-hmm.
And Jerry's going to say, to anybody who says, because he don't care.
Greg just held up his middle finger for those people listening on the audio podcast. Let me finish things up with 2 or 3 more real quick ones here. But actually, this one might take some a long explanation on your part. It's another great question from Bear Truth 9. It says, Greg, what do you think about the team talent going into the offseason? Do you feel it can be retooled and ready to compete next year?
Well, you got to, right off the bat, I think the people are in place for the offensive line to be pretty good. Okay. They're young. They're young, and they're going to be around for a while. And if you look at it across the board, there's throw out Peters because he was only brought in because of an emergency. Right. But you got a lot of young guys there who are still in their 20s who were, got a lot of good football ahead of them, and I think they're pretty good players. Tight end position, I think, is in real good hands. There are a few good receivers. You've got to replace A-Rod. And who's that going to be? Who knows? You can get a really good receiver in the second round. Mm-hmm. And he can become, in time, a number 1 receiver. Mm-hmm. But you need a number 1 receiver today.
Right.
Okay, so that means you're going to have to spend some money in free agency. Mm-hmm. And, I just can't see that deal getting done with A-Rob here under present circumstances. Now, if you got different people in the front office, maybe that changes.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the Bears, Brad Biggs talked about this in his Q&A column last week about potentially trading Robert Quinn to alleviate some cap issues and potentially bring in a second, third rounder kind of thing?
Well, I don't think he's, how old is Robert?
He's 32, I believe.
Okay. I don't think you're going to, and he's got a pretty big contract.
$12 million, which isn't too bad for next season.
Yeah, but there's they restructured this year.
That's right.
And so they switched the bonus thing so to cut him. Mm-hmm. And let me see if I can find it. Bear with me. You can talk for a while.
Absolutely. I'll let people know that we're going to be back here at the Barroom Network talking more football tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Central. It'll be the Bear Debate with John Buffone and Tyler Ellis. We might have some surprises for you as well. We're working on that. And then at 8 p.m. Central, it's the Dan and Aldo Bear Their Souls show. I got to tell you that Dan Aguirre, he was ready to turn in his chips. He was so upset and miserable. I mean, the guy was practically depressed with the Bears' performance, but that victory really lifted his soul and his hopes that maybe these Bears can accomplish something next season. And so he's back in the fold as a Bears fan.
Okay. You trade him or cut him next year, you're going to have a $12.5 million cap hit.
And why do that, right? Why do that? Yeah.
Yeah. And dead money, $23.9 million. And this is post, no, you're not going to do that. And I was having a Twitter discussion with somebody last week or the week before about that same thing, because he said he'd get rid of Quinn. I go, why? He's got 17 sacks.
It doesn't make sense to get rid of him. I don't, if you can bring back Mack and Quinn next season, that is the foundation to have a more than respectable defense.
And you got Gibson to play in a rotation.
Exactly. So that to me doesn't make sense. So to answer Bear Truth 9's question, do you think that this roster can be retooled? Do you think that the Bears can be competitive next season with some retooling?
Yeah, number one, Justin is going to be in a second year, and it's not all going to be new to him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, what's the offense going to be? Etc. Who's the coach, the coaching staff? We don't know the answer to that. Maybe it's going to be the same people. Maybe it's going to be new people. Everybody seems to think it's going to be new people, but until it actually is, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to get, as I said, at least one more receiver, maybe two.
And they only have 2 under contract for next season, if I recall correctly.
Yeah,
so,
a lot of these guys got 1-year deals, but
right.
and they're cheap.
Right.
But you're going to get, unless you somehow find a way to re-sign A-Rob and off his numbers this year, why would you?
Yeah.
And I don't think he's lost anything. I think it's just what has gone on.
Yeah.
But still, that's $18 million it's costing you. I'm going to say that you're going to get a quality receiver at what you paid him originally.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're going to have him for 4 years or something.
Right.
And at pretty good value.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You got to get a couple DBs. You got to get another corner. You got to get a safety. So, I would think right off the bat, you got to get 2. You got to replace Akeem. So that's a defensive lineman. 2, 3, 5 players.
So no chance of Akeem coming back.
Oh, I'm not going to say that. It's got to come back at the right price.
Right. He'll have.
You got to go back. Go back to what I said a little while ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, okay, if you're getting X amount of dollars, you got to give that back.
Right.
Right? Okay, so let me see if I still got the Bears thing up here.
Because, he's making over $12 million this season, I want to say, easily.
Yeah, well, and he's out of contract.
Right.
So I don't have his numbers not shown on here for some
reason. I'll get it.
But anyway, you got to get, if you're giving him $10 or $12 million, you've got to give him $10 or $12 million back. Well, how many games has he missed?
Right. He's making $12 million this season, and you're absolutely right. Now, I got a question for you regarding contract structure. If you do an incentive-based deal, let's say, hey, Akeem, we're going to give you $6 million, your base salary. It's totally guaranteed. And now you will get, I don't know, $500,000, whatever, for each start, $250,000, whatever it is.
Right.
Well, how does that factor into the cap?
Your base salary is factored into the cap. The other stuff is considered unlikely to be earned until it is earned. But once they are earned, you get hit with it.
Okay. So it could potentially push you over the cap at a certain part of the season, and you've got to make player changes in order to get back under the cap.
Well, you're gonna know that. You're gonna assume. Let's say you're giving them $200,000 a game times 17 games, so that's $3.4 million, right?
Right.
You got to figure that he's going to play 14 games.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got to have that figured into your negotiation or figured into your salary cap proposal or whatever, and if it comes out that he misses half the season and you only spend $1.7 million or whatever, then that's extra money to you. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing about the cap, if you got leftover cap money at the end of the season, it gets carried over.
Yes.
But the Bears don't have a whole lot.
Right.
So what do they have right now without doing a contract? And I'm going to assume they're not going to do any contracts between now and the end of the season. Okay, team cap space, $1.883 million. Okay, well, big deal.
Yeah, it is kind of scary, though. I mean, But we'll talk more in depth maybe next week about cap stuff, because I actually got 2 or 3 really good questions that I want to maybe visualize some of these questions so that it'll be easier for us to understand. Because for me anyway, the cap stuff starts to get a little vague because with math, I'm awful.
Well, there's so many things that get involved. Like all your practice squad players.
Yeah.
That money is part of your cap.
Right. And it's usually
now how about this? When you bounce a guy back and forth, let's say, okay, you brought up 3 guys from the practice squad this past weekend to play. Well, guess what? They got a raise this week. It's only for 1 game, but you got to figure that in. They're not getting, even though they're only active for 1 day or 2 days, they're getting paid the full week. They're getting that, the minimum. In a lot of cases, there's a rookie minimum divided by 17 or actually 18 now, because you got 17 weeks in a bye week, and in your pay period. Players get paid during the course of the season. That's it. They don't get paid during the off season unless they got bonuses due like March 1st or something like that. But they you get used to be 17 equal paychecks. Now you get 18 equal paychecks.
Gotcha. All right. 2 very, very important questions here from George. I'll ask him one at a time. Would you accept a consulting job with the Chicago Bears?
Probably. And I know why you're laughing, you sneaky little bastard.
We'll move on to his final question. Greg, are you a scotch and soda guy?
No.
So
no. In fact, I stopped drinking scotch 3-4 years ago, and strictly bourbon. I like bourbon better. And I like scotch. I got nothing against it, but I like bourbon better.
I am with you 100%. Give me a good bottle of bourbon, and I'm a happy guy for a couple of weeks.
I got my wife a bottle for Christmas. You ever had Yellowstone?
No, never had Yellowstone.
It's really good. And I thought originally when I saw it that it had to do with the, marketing for the TV show.
Right.
It really has nothing to do with the TV show at all. And the bourbon's been around. They got the regular Yellowstone bourbon, and then they got a special edition that's about $450 a bottle. But it's good stuff.
I try not to spend over $50-$60 for a good bottle of bourbon, but every once in a while, those 70.
I don't usually this cost me like 40.
Oh, that's good.
I like you ever had 46?
Oh, I love it.
Okay, that's mid 40s.
Yeah, definitely. There's great bourbon.
There's that's usually where I go. Now, when I go on my golf trip with, my wife so nicely calls the old guys, every summer, then I bring a little nicer bottle.
There you go.
I might spend $70-$80.
Nice. Now, do you drink it straight up or with some soda?
No, I drink it straight with some ice. Yeah. Now my wife, she's got, she wouldn't touch whiskey. She had a real bad experience with Jack when she was in her 20s. And so she wouldn't touch it. So then I made her, I'm going to say 4 years ago, a Kentucky Mule.
I've heard of it, but I don't really know what's in there.
Well, it's the same thing as a Moscow Mule, except it's with bourbon instead of vodka.
Okay.
So you got bourbon, simple syrup, lime juice, and it's really tasty. And so she's been drinking those. And then my old neighbor used to live down the street. Now he lives out in Vegas. They were here, I don't know, a month or so ago. He had a drink. He said, let's try this one. You take the bourbon, 2 shots of bourbon to 1 shot of pure maple syrup. and then about a half a shot of lemon juice or a half a lemon squeezed, and shake it up for 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little too sweet for me. My wife likes it.
Mm-hmm.
She loves it. So now for the last month, that's all she's been drinking.
Oh, cool.
But that's a good drink, good bourbon drink to have. But like I say, I'll drink it 90% of the time. Just pour it over some ice and sip it down.
Now, have you ever had bourbon and pot? That's an outstanding combination.
That sounds like a hard day. Somebody asked me about Buffalo Trace on there. Yeah, I've had Buffalo Trace.
Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. Yeah. Getting off the whiskey subject, Don Burr wants to know if you know Mike Martin, the former Carolina scout.
No.
All right. Well, so we end on a downer.
No, I that's the name that I knew a lot of guys that worked at Carolina. I don't know that guy. And the new GM, Scott Fitterer, I worked with in New York. And so I know Scott real well.
Mm-hmm.
What do we got? Another one here.
Well, Aaron is saying people mix Maker's Mark down in Kentucky where he lives. People mix Maker's Mark with Ale 8. I've never even heard of Ale 8.
What is Ale 8? What's Ale 8?
It's a Kentucky ginger ale.
Oh, ginger beer. That's like, is that like a ginger beer? Because that's part of your Kentucky Mule is the lime juice, the ginger beer, and a little simple syrup.
Okay. All right. Well,
but my wife has to have diet ginger beer.
Okay. Well, I should, what was the name? Aaron, remind me the name of that drink that we had down in Cleveland. I met Aaron and his wife, his gorgeous wife, at a bar, and they were all drinking, and they were drinking some sweet drink, and it had an obscene name. And so after they brought us around, and we were all, wow, this is really tasty. I said, well, I'll buy the next round. What's the name of this thing again? And they told me the name, and I had to go to the bar and say, can you please make me 5 more of those? And now I'm forgetting the name. It's something.
It cost you about $120.
Yeah, almost. But it had something to do with the word pussy, and the bartender was a woman, and she knew what I was ordering, and so I did not want to
laugh at you.
Yeah, I did not want to say that in her presence, and she goes, come on, tell me what you want. Tell me. And so I had to say it. And Aaron, I forgot the name of that drink. I haven't had it since. It probably won't now, just because I'm afraid to order it in public. All right, Greg. By the way, your go-to drink on a Sunday afternoon after a Bears win is what?
I don't drink during Bears games.
After the game, after a Bears win.
No, I don't. I think I told you this last year. Mm-hmm. So it'll be, when's the 30th? Thursday night?
Yep.
Last year on the 30th,
mm-hmm.
I got totally wasted.
Yeah, you did mention that.
and like worst drunk of my entire life.
Oh no.
And I had a physical therapy appointment the next day, so New Year's Eve, and I had to cancel that because I couldn't move. And, I made love to the porcelain bowl 4 times that night. And what an awful experience. But
yeah. So
and since then, I haven't had that. Like, I have 1 or 2 drinks. Mm-hmm. That's about it. But oftentimes my wife will come home and she'll make a drink, but I won't have one.
Really? See, I can't let my wife drink alone.
and
she lets me.
We're going to our next door neighbors later this week, and we never walk out of that house sober. So,
well, call me if you need a ride home.
Well, that's the good thing. It's next door.
Here's the name of that drink that I was.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Wet pussy shot.
Wow.
Imagine me. Can I get 5?
My wife would slap me if I even said that.
Yeah, it is a very, very bizarre name for a drink, especially one that you would order in public. All right, Greg, this has been a tremendous 90 plus minutes of Bears talk and learning about tons of stuff. I mean, I'm seeing in the chat room, I love this kind of talk. This is the kind of football talk that you're not going to get on the radio because everything is in 15 minutes. And so we're able to go in depth here and listen to Greg's stories. It is always a pleasure.
What I like about doing this is we ad lib. You can go off in a different direction and then come back.
Yep.
Get brought back to center and
yeah. I mean,
I could do this with you for 2-3 hours and it's I might need a break to hit the head, but otherwise, yeah.
Well, let's plan on maybe let's talk about 2023 in the near future, or 2022, I should say, in the near future. We'll maybe design a 2 hour or so show and have some fun. But we've got 2 more of these coming after Bears games, and hopefully
we got more than 2 because
yes,
probably be something. I in all fairness, and I hate talking about this. I thought something might happen today, but obviously nothing did. Mm-hmm. And so now I don't think anything will happen until the end of the season.
I'm totally with you.
Now, I had read some things. What are the Bears doing? They're losing out. Well, nobody else got fired either.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Jacksonville can interview, and I've seen some names. Caldwell. What was the other 2 names?
Really? The former Lions coach has been mentioned?
Yeah. Just for Jacksonville.
Okay. I gotcha. Okay.
And, Peterson, Caldwell. So 2 guys are out of work, and I don't remember who the third name was.
Aaron wants to know if we're going to get a Greg Gabriel college scouting show this offseason. And I know, Aaron, he would.
I'm not up to date with the draft, but I'm always up to date with the process.
Yeah, well, then
and I'll get up to date, with the draft. It's just that I don't have time with my little side gig. I don't have time.
Yeah,
for that.
Yeah, and we could always highlight just spend an hour talking about 2 or 3 players that you've looked at and have heard stories about and so forth, and share that. That's something perhaps we should entertain doing once the draft season arrives.
I'm going to assume right now. I mean, you're going to have a high second round pick.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're going to get a guy. I'm going to tell you right now that's in your first round.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the way it works. Because
right.
no 2 boards are the same.
Right.
And so, they're probably going to get a guy, they're going to be drafting 37, 38, something like that. And unless they win the next 2 games, and that's entirely possible.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
But you're going to probably get a guy that's on their board at 25-ish.
Right.
The 25th best player, and they're going to be happy as hell. But that's the way it is in every draft room in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 3rd round, they're going to get a guy that they got rated as a 2nd rounder.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to be happy. You can get some quality people at the top of the 2nd round.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, you have the 1st round on Thursday night. And by the way, this year, you ever seen Kenny Wayne Shepherd?
No.
Do you know who Kenny Wayne Shepherd is?
No, I don't.
Oh, he's a blues rock guy who's Kenny Wayne Shepherd band. I've seen him a dozen times.
Oh, I heard him.
And I love him. And he's had some Grammys. Come on, where are you?
I know.
What do you listen to? Punk rock or something?
I listen to everything, but not Kenny Wayne Shepherd.
Well, put on some Kenny Wayne Shepherd and you're going to like him right away.
Excellent.
Anyway, I love seeing Kenny Wayne Shepherd live. Puts on a great show.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing in Milwaukee the night of day 1 of the draft. I said,
how could he do that, Kenny?
That's what I'm going, well, wait a minute. Bears don't have a 1st round pick. Maybe I'll go anyway. I mean, what the hell?
A lot of people in the chat room know Kenny.
Yeah, he said great, excellent guitarist.
Yeah. So I will definitely put that on my my iTunes queue. Yeah, and then the three major things over the next few months that I'm going to be grilling you on is, once we know what's going to happen at Hallis Hall with changes at the top being GM, wherever. Secondly, free agency, and of course, then the draft. Those are three big milestones that we will be getting together on and talking about with fans. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. This is always fun, and maybe next week, let's allot 2 hours for our talk, because we've got so many things that we can go over.
Well,
and
we're going to be talking about a win, so
I hope so. This guy,
not hope. Don't bring in these negative vibes and say hope.
Okay.
They stone cold. They're 6.5 point favorites. I think that's the first time all year.
Yeah, how about that? I saw that Brad Biggs put that out immediately, because
he gets it from Joe Fortenbaugh right away.
Who is Joe? Is he a big name? Everybody seems to know him but me.
No, okay. Joe, I used to be with I was a part owner of the National Football Post, and Joe was too. And Joe was their fantasy football guy and betting guy. Lived out in the West Coast, and then he moved to San Francisco. He had a show in San Francisco, radio show. And I'm going to say he's only been in radio maybe 10 years, but he does a great job. And now he's part of ESPN, but he's in Vegas, and he's one of their gambling experts.
Okay.
And so he's right on the strip, but real good guy. But Biggsy wrote for the National Football Post. I wrote for the National Football Post. Joe wrote for the National Football Post. That's how Biggsy gets.
Gotcha.
Gets Joe Fortenbaugh. So he goes, my guy, Joe Fortenbaugh.
I don't want to let you go without you answering this question. The Factor says, will Nagy stick with Foles? So here's the scenario I want to present to you. Let's say Justin Fields, who, by the way, Brad Biggs is reporting, was in a walking boot for most of last week. So let's say Justin Fields cannot play Sunday against the Giants, and both Dalton and Foles can play. Who's your starter, Greg?
I was thinking to say Foles.
Me too. Let him audition for that backup job next season.
Yeah, but Justin Fields, I'm going to assume he can play, but if he had a high ankle sprain, he might be done. He might not even be able to play against Minnesota. But I want to see him get more snaps. He needs to get more snaps, so I hope he can play.
Me too.
But I'm going to say Foles backed up by Dalton. I mean, they had, I don't even know who the guy's name was that did the backup yesterday.
Ryan Willis.
Yeah, well, who's he?
Nobody knows.
Yeah, I mean, God, can you imagine if he had to play?
Jeez.
And I'll tell you, they would have gone to the Wildcat the rest of the game, I swear.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's why they had it in the playbook. And I mean, it's always in the playbook, but that's why we saw it yesterday, despite the fact it rarely works. Anyway, that's our show for today. Remember, we'll be back here tomorrow night with back-to-back Bears shows. And Greg and I will be talking about a Bears win next Monday night or Monday afternoon at around 2:00 or so. So, Greg, again, thank you very much. And
it'll be next year, too. So
that's right. I'll see you next year. Exactly. Take care, everybody, and thanks for tuning in.
See you later.